willing to save all those people from their slavish lives. Orwell again writes, we're skipping away, so different context. In the end, the European peoples may have to accept American domination as a way of avoiding domination by Russia. But they ought to realize, while there is yet time, that there are other possibilities. Now, as in 1947, the other possibilities he means are the European Union. At the time there was Russia, and there was America, and then there was a broken camp of a whole bunch of independent states called Europe. So they're either going to have to go one way or the other. And he says, but remember the third alternative. We could band together and become a single nation. And they ended up doing that now, and they've done it so ridiculously, in such a bizarre and stupid way, with their 25 countries, or 15, or however many they have, and a constitution that is like 1,000 pages long or something. It is an insane length. Or maybe it's like 190 pages long. It's probably 2,400 pages long. It's enormous. A constitution, can you believe that? And in another 1947 essay he concluded, therefore, a socialist United States of Europe seems to me the only worthwhile political objective today. Socialist states of Europe? He wanted Europe to band together and become socialist. Not communist. No, no, no. We're not evil. We're good. We want to share everything, but we want to do it the right way, not the wrong way. And he wanted all Europe to band together to do that. Good thing we kept Europe free instead of letting them go down that road. I mean, some of them did socialize, and we have socialized to a great extent, but I mean, good thing that we didn't let them dive off the edge, like Sweden, for example. Every few minutes we have that. I mean, we've managed to have a fairly peaceful half-century with them as allies and so on, and trading partners. But the important thing is that they didn't end up being dominated by some statist entity that would then launch them into war against us, or even just sit there while we were fighting somebody and not help, which is sort of what's happening with the Muslim thing. Not that they're not being attacked too, you know. What was it, on 7704 or something, 7703, the subway bombings in Madrid and the bus bombings in London and stuff. I mean, they're in on it too. There's no, they're part of this. But we've been able to manage to keep them on our side this long by our hegemonic power after World War II. They have managed to corrupt themselves from within by massive amounts of immigration and racism in the way they deal with immigrants, namely recognizing the immigrant's race is important. And so, in spite of all the work we did in World War II and all the fighting and all the money spent rebuilding the bastards, here we are 50 years later, and they're throwing it away. Anyway. But we've gone this long, and we've made it this far, and I think the Muslims might be able to be dealt with. We'll see. Skipping on, we're now to the next chapter, page 104, chapter 4, called Orwell and America. Okay, here we are on page 104. Quieter surrounding than Central Park is the apartment when it's not occupied. Now, Mr. Hitchens talks a little bit about the American Revolution. And get this, he says that it fully deserves its place in the pedigree of radical upheavals because of its long alliance with France and because of its ancestry in the English Revolution of the 1640s. So, if we wouldn't have had a long alliance with France and the ancestry of the English Revolution in the 1640s, then the American Revolution wouldn't deserve its place in the pedigree of radical upheavals? I don't know what exactly he means by radical, but I think America's revolution has a little more going for it than that we were allied with France. Yes, it did come through the culture of Britain in the 1640s, and it came through the culture of Magna Carta from the 1200s, and it came through the culture of the ancient Greeks. Now, in the same paragraph, the second Second sentence here is also worth something. The American Revolution has had its full share of contradictions and negations. Its original proclamation by slaveholders, who insisted that all men are created equal, is one of the first affirmations on record that some are more equal than others. Right? We hold slaves, everyone's equal, but we're just more equal. Interesting there, but that's what everybody loves to make note of, is the fact that we had slave-holding presidents. But nobody puts near as much focus and effort on the fact that the presidents and the founding fathers we had established, the greatest and the first and the best and now the oldest in all history. It's the oldest, longest standing government that there is on the planet. Sure, they did all that, but they owned slaves. Well, everybody in history owned slaves. And there were some of these guys that wanted to do away with that situation. Like, you can't really think that Thomas Jefferson is such a bad guy when you look into what he believed about slaves, how he treated his own slaves and how they treated him, and the different things he had on the plantation to have them give them better overalls, and the people who worked, the slaves who worked really hard and were really good and skilled and really put their best in, would get better overalls. Now, that sounds terrible, to have that be your life's ambition, is to be able to wear better overalls. But if you look at the details of Jefferson's life, he wasn't that bad of a guy. And you wouldn't know that based on what you read and listen to, what you hear about the founding fathers. Like this here, they were all slaveholders, or some of them were slaveholders. They established a government that 75 years later did away with slavery in a forceful, violent manner. They set the basis of that system down. I don't think they get enough credit, and I think that they are too derogated for having owned slaves when everybody owned slaves. And what if the slaves would have been either sold off or freed, manumitted, or whatever it is, manumission? I'm not against that. I think Jefferson maybe should have, but give him at least the moral credit of doing what he did. Don't take it all away because he owned slaves. It was one of the most important intellectual jobs in human history. Let's put it in perspective, the writing of the Declaration of Independence and the Virginia Statutes on Religious Freedom. Very important documents that Jefferson was involved in. Now, the third sentence in this paragraph is also worth some of our time. But as the third millennium gets underway, and as the Russian and Chinese and Cuban revolutions drop below the horizon, it is possible to argue that the American Revolution, with its promise, he goes on a little more, so he's putting the American Revolution, the Chinese, the Cuban, and the Russian Revolution in a group. That's almost impossible, except just to say that it was change of government. Other than that, there's almost no similarity. So grouping them and saying one of them's out for this or that reason is crazy. Hitchens is so fried on Marxism, he doesn't know his head from his ass in these cases. But it is possible to argue that the American Revolution, with its promise of cosmopolitan democracy, is the only model revolution that humanity has left to it. Now, he is slightly redeemed by going that far and saying that we don't have any model revolutions left. And I would ask, what would the other candidates be? What other model revolutions did we have before they dropped below the horizon? And we know the ones he's named, the Chinese, Russian, and Cuban revolutions. Well, if that's all the American Revolution has as competition in being the greatest, the American wins. The only model revolution that we have. Okay, next paragraph. Orwell exhibited a curious blind spot when it came to Paine's adopted country. So he's just been going on talking about Thomas Paine, writer of Common Sense, as he'll do. And Paine was from Britain, but moved to America. Well, that's Paine's adopted country then, America. Now, George Orwell